Okay, 1, 2.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone, to the webinar this evening. I'm Kim Bischoff, the Executive Director of the Neurofibromatosis Network. And tonight we are very fortunate to have with us Katie Vanlandingham from Scoyoc Associates with us. We'll be talking about how to educate your congressmen and senators in their local districts about the importance of federal funding for neurofibromatosis research. This year we're celebrating 20 years of playing a vital role in the process of advocating for NF research funds. On February 5th through the 7th this year, 70 NF advocates from across the country will be traveling to Washington, D.C., meeting with over 200 congressional offices asking for support of NF research. Tonight we want to expand that base and by educating you about the message for you to take to your local offices and make the same request of support. We'll be explaining the process, the request, and the tools available for assistance. But first I'd like to tell you a little bit about the NF Network. It was founded in 1988 by regional, independent, local NF organizations. They created a national organization that served as an umbrella to facilitate collaboration on national issues, creating a networking of shared resources. This allows for the local organizations to have autonomy. The mission of the NF Network is to find treatments and a cure for neurofibromatosis by promoting scientific research, improving clinical care, providing outreach through education and awareness while offering hope and support to those affected by NF. The NF Network is leading in NF advocacy and building NF community, and we are founded on 3 pillars. Tonight we're talking about promoting NF research, and we do that through our advocacy program. We also are building NF community. We do that through our educational meetings, social gatherings, and we're also funding our mission. You can see on this slide here the different organizations, member organizations that work together with the NF Network on its mission. I'll go through real quickly so you get a little bit of an idea of what some of these organizations do. This is NF Northeast. They serve Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont, and Rhode Island. NF Central Plains serving Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma. NF California. NF Arizona serving Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. NF Michigan serving Michigan and Ohio. Washington State NF serving Washington. Tonight we're talking about one of the programs from the NF Network. It's called the NF Network Advocacy Program. So the member organization as well as other independent 501c3 NF organizations participate in this program. And when we gather, we're working on a grassroots advocacy program to promote federal funds for NF research. This program started back in 1996, and we've played a vital role in successfully advocating for over $300 million through the Army's NF research program, which Katie's going to talk to you about in a little bit, and inclusion of NF research language at the National Institutes of Health. Last year, we had 53 dedicated and very passionate NF advocates who conducted over 200 congressional meetings in 2 days. We had 33 states represented. In this webinar tonight, we aim to increase the number of meetings held in local congressional offices. And now I would like to introduce to you Katie Vanlandingham from Scoyoc Associates. Thanks for joining us, Katie.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and get started here.
If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So first I want to talk to you a little bit about how NF research is funded. So as Kim mentioned, it's funded through several institutes at the National Institutes of Health and also through the Department of Defense. Next slide.
That just explains it a little bit more, Katie. I'll go ahead and move on.
Okay. So next let's talk a little bit about kind of typically how our advocacy schedule looks throughout a year. As I said before, we have the Army's NF Research Program, which is funded through the Department of Defense Appropriations Bill, the funding bill that funds all of the programs through the Department of Defense, of which this is one of them. And then there's also the National Institutes of Health through one of the other of the 12 appropriations bills, and this one is called the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Bill. And it funds many of, besides the National Institutes of Health, other education and health programs in the government. So in January, we typically decide what our funding request is going to be for the next fiscal year. We will be talking about fiscal year 2018 for this year. In February, the advocates come to Washington, D.C., meet with House and Senate members to identify, and we identify congressional support. We educate Congress about NF and the Army's NF research program, and we justify the amount that we're asking for, which we'll talk about later. In the February-March timeframe, we start grassroots level email, phone, meetings in the district office, which we'll talk about that we would like you all to do. We request that members sign on to what we call a Dear Colleague letter, which I will get into in the next couple of slides. The Dear Colleague letter is circulated in the House and Senate, and it's directed to the two subcommittees, the Defense and the Labor, Health, and Human Services, of which we get our funding from. In April, we typically submit testimony to the two subcommittees, just talking about NF and our ask for the year. We continue to do grassroots education of Congress through letters and emails and phone calls. In June and July, the committees typically meet and write their pieces of legislation, and we typically learn what is in the bills for NF research. In September, October is typically when they would do what they call a conference committee, where the House and Senate meet to work out the differences in their two bills and come to a compromise and come up with the final funding level. Sometimes we do a second grassroots push at that point to ensure that we get the highest level possible in that final bill. And then in November, December, in a perfect world, a bill is then submitted to the President. Next slide. This just talks a little bit more about our legislative agenda for fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2018. Typically, we would have 2017 already wrapped up. A little bit of an odd year, and we don't have that wrapped up yet. So this year we'll be talking about funding for finishing up fiscal 17 and going into 2018. So in the Defense Appropriations Bill, we ask for support for funding for the Army's NF research program, which is what they call one of the congressionally directed medical research programs, which just means that Congress is the one that directs the funding to that program. And then in the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Bill, we are asking for what they call report language, which is just language that directed to the National Institutes of Health, encouraging them to increase funding to do research on NF. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what a Dear Colleague letter is and what we're going to be asking you to do. So in order to show support for the NF program funding, letters are sent to Senate and House Defense and Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations subcommittees each year by members of Congress. The Dear Colleague letter is written by a congressman or a senator asking the Appropriations Committee to consider a certain level of funding. We use Dear Colleague letters to ask the subcommittee to include the NF research in their appropriations bill for the fiscal year. And we ask congressional staff that we meet with to ask the congressmen that they work for to sign on to this Dear Colleague letter asking, supporting NF research. Next slide. So for fiscal year 2018, we anticipate that the leaders for the letters will be Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts. He has led the letter for the last several years in the Senate. And in the House, Representative Luis Gutierrez from Illinois has been the champion of our letter for many years. And we anticipate that Glenn Grossman from Wisconsin is going to be the Republican on the letter this year. The Republican that we've had in the past, Reed Ribble, retired last year, so we're looking for a new Republican this year. And the goal is to get as many members of Congress to sign on to these letters showing support as possible. Next slide. So for fiscal year 2017, for the House letter, we had 121 House offices sign on to the letter. You can see a list here and on the next slide in alphabetical order. And you can just look through to see if your member of Congress has signed on. And we would obviously encourage those members and try to get new members for 2018. Next slide. And then here you can see the members of the Senate that signed the 2017 letter. Next slide. So next I want to get into how to identify your member of Congress in order to be able to request a meeting with them in the district. So you can go on to, for the House, to identify your House member, you would go on to the House website, which is www.house.gov. There is a box located in the top right-hand corner where you can enter your zip code, and that should pull up who your representative is. Sometimes your zip code, if you know the +4, it's always good to use that +4, but sometimes it will, your district may be split among 2 members of Congress. It will just ask you to put your address in, and then it will be able to narrow it down to who your member is. In the Senate, it's www.senate.gov. There's a red bar across near the top of the page. You can click on senators, and it will list the senators by state. There's also a pull-down menu in the top right corner that says Find Your Senators, and you can find your senator that way as well. Next slide. So in order to schedule a meeting in the district office, the first thing that we want to do is call the Washington office or the local office and ask who handles state scheduling requests. The information, it's possible the information will be on the member's website, but it's always good to find that number and call and verify who would handle those requests. Some offices handle them in the Washington, D.C. office. Some handle state scheduling requests in a specific state office. So it's best to make sure you ask about state scheduling requests. You can find the phone numbers, like I said, and the location of the district offices on individual members' websites. And there are links to those websites on the House page and the Senate page that I directed you to on the previous slide. So contact the state, once you find the name of the scheduler, contact the state scheduler and request a time to meet with the member of Congress when they will be back in the district. So they have district work periods, a lot of times around holidays, sometimes just every couple of weeks. Members will be back in the state and district. It's a good time to request to meet with them. If they won't be back in the office when you'd like to meet, you can always request to meet with someone else in the office, a staff member who handles health or defense issues. And the ideal time for a meeting would be the month of February to get this request in. Next slide. So for scheduling a meeting in the district office, once you have a meeting scheduled, make sure you let Kim Bischoff know when your meeting will take place, and her contact information is here. If you do not feel comfortable going to the meeting yourself, or you would like a little bit of help prior to the meeting, please make sure to get in touch with Kim and request a mentor to either accompany you to the meeting or talk you through things beforehand. And then we will also provide leave behind materials that you can print before your meeting and take with you, and we will show you some examples of those leave behind materials at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So next I'd like to talk a little bit about how to structure your congressional meeting. So when you go in, you'll want to obviously introduce yourself, explain what NF is. Make sure you talk about a personal story. Why is NF important to you? How does it personally affect you? Discuss the military benefit. This is important because we're getting funding through the Department of Defense, and in this time of uncertainty and tight budgets, it's very important to make sure to tie this research to the Department of Defense, and we'll give you some information on how to do that. You also want to make sure that you let them know how NF impacts their state and their district. Is there research going on in the district or state? how many families are in the area. So just make sure to make it personal to them. Explain the NF research program and how the NFRP and NIH complement each other. Next slide. So to get into a little bit more details, in the introduction, thank them for meeting with you. Tell them where your name, where you're from, that you're representing the NF patient advocacy organization. In explaining a little bit about NF, some things you might want to talk about are, that NF is a highly variable neurological genetic condition causing tumor growth. You go into a little bit about what NF is. It can affect almost every single organ system in the body, causes tumor growth along nerves. Talk about the symptoms and how it can be different for every person, but ranges from severe pain, brain tumors, deafness, blindness, learning disabilities, heart disease, bone disease, cancer. And currently there's no way to predict where or when the tumors will grow. Next slide. A little bit more about, like I said before, you really need to make this personal. You need to explain why you're there and why this funding is important. I'm getting a little bit more into the military benefit. The researchers have told us that NF is a model disorder that crosses many body parts. Funded research has determined that NF gene controls pathways which are directly related to pain, nerve regeneration, wound healing, blood vessel growth, bone healing, muscle weakness, learning disabilities, behavior and brain function, tumor growth, 70% of all human cancers, and affecting over 175 million Americans, including members of the military. All of these things, obviously, wound healing, nerve regeneration, important to the military. And then, like I said before, you need to make sure that you talk about how NF specifically impacts their state or their district, and any research is being funded there. If you know, we can share the information with you about how much funding is going to that state. If you have, talk about your personal story, but you might also want to bring a letter from other families that are affected in the area. Anything that would be able to help them understand how this really affects them. Next slide. So next you really want to get into explaining what the neurofibromatosis research program is. So it was established in 1996 as one of the Department of Defense's congressionally directed medical research programs. It's an efficiently run national program. It offers awards through a competitive peer review process, and it fills gaps in ongoing research. It complements initiatives at other agencies such as the National Institutes of Health. The NFRP has participation from NF researchers at the NIH and from NF-affected individuals. There's an NF Clinical Trials Consortium that's funded through the NFRP, which significantly accelerates the clinical trials process by recruiting patients from 18 clinical sites and with an operations center to analyze the data. And it's produced several clinical trials with more coming. Next slide. Next, you might want to talk about a little bit about a success story. And Kim, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what you normally talk about.
Yeah, so for years I've been talking about the lovastatin study with for learning disabilities that went through the Clinical Trials Consortium. So that's one area, because obviously that not only affects the NF population but the general population, including the military. But recently we've had some great success with a MEK inhibitor study that's showing reduction of the plexiform neurofibromas for 20%. So I've been using that story, and I have more information about it, and actually could provide you with a slide of information that you could take to your meetings to show that success.
Okay, next you really want to talk about how the NIH complements research that's being done at the NFRP. NF research at NIH has increased proportionally to the funding at the NFRP, but the NFRP funds cutting-edge, higher-risk research projects, and those projects collect data which increases the chance for good science to be then funded at NIH. NIH does a NIH-NF meeting to collaborate research being done at NF at different institutes, and the Army and NIH really do collaborate a lot in making sure that there's no overlap in what they're funding, that they're funding different projects, and there is a lot of communication between the two programs, and that's something that the Hill, a lot of people on the Hill really want to know. They want to know that there's no duplication in the research. Next slide. So just to summarize, in fiscal year 2017 and 2018, in the Defense Appropriations Bill, we are seeking supporting $15 million in funding for the Army's NF research program in the Department of Defense Appropriations Bill. We are requesting that report language on NF research at the National Institutes of Health be included in the fiscal 2018 Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Bill. A Dear Colleague letter will be circulated in both the House and Senate. You can tell the staffer or the member that you're meeting with that you will be in touch once the letter starts circulating. And then ask the office for their support by submitting these requests to the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee and the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee. Next slide. Just a couple points I wanted to review. So make sure that you make it local. You are a constituent, and they want to know what you have, hear what you have to say. Make it personal. Tell your story. Remember to ask for support. Don't always assume that they will help you. You're likely to, a lot of times you're likely to meet staff and not the members. It just depends on the time of year. In the district, you might get lucky and be able to meet with the member, but just be prepared to meet with staff, which is actually fine. I mean, the staff a lot of times are the experts on the issue, and they have the ear of the members, so don't be put off by that. You know, make sure you give them the information and stay in touch with them. Be flexible. You never know. Something might change at the last minute. They may have to change the time of the meeting. You know, maybe the person you're meeting with may change. They may ask you to do a phone, you know, a meeting in a hallway or something. You just never know. You have to make sure you're flexible. The meeting could last as short as 15 minutes. You know, plan to make your point quickly if necessary. Next slide. Make sure you arrive on time, and do begin by thanking the legislator or the staff for meeting with you. State that you're a constituent or your relationship with the state. Do keep your message short, relevant, and to the point. If you're going with a group of people, make sure you designate a spokesperson and so that you know what each person is going to cover. And do make your ask. Don't just go over your points. Ask your member to take action on your behalf. Next slide. Make sure you justify your request, but don't overwhelm the staff with too much information. Do leave the suggested letters and fact sheets on the issue. Do thank them, and a template will be sent to you for your use in order to have something to work off of. And make sure that you follow up. Next slide.
So
make sure you get a card. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Katie. So once you've done the meeting, make sure you do your follow-up. Make sure you get a card from the staffer during your meeting so that you can contact them directly. Yeah, if you're meeting by phone, make sure you ask for the staffer's email. You're really trying to build a relationship with the staffer. Right after the meeting, jot down any questions so that you then have an opportunity to reach back to the member. Follow up your visit with a personal letter and thanking the member for taking the time with meeting you. And then you can send a note directly to the staffer, using this as an opportunity to continue that ongoing relationship. So some of the tools that we have to help you with this meeting, which we'll be glad to get to you, is this is the NF fact sheet. So when you tell your personal story, since NF has so many different manifestations, you can use those photos on the top to describe other manifestations that others have with neurofibromatosis. Then on the left side of the sheet, it's really the description about what NF is. And then the right side of the sheet talks about the NF research programs, how they collaborate with one another. And then the very bottom is where it says what we are seeking. That's our ask. That's what we're looking for this year. Then we'll also provide for you a military benefits sheet. This is where we have had a scientific writer go through the research from last year, collect all the research that's being done on NF and how it impacts on the warfighter. And these are in the areas of bone repair, muscle weakness, pain management, psychosocial disabilities, vascular disease, and wound healing. One of the ways that we really want to be able to let everybody who's doing this advocacy work know about the work that's coming out of this program is 3 times a year we produce the Network Edge. And in that you'll be able to see all the recently published NF scientific papers, and then the ones that are produced with funding from the CDMRP NF research program are listed in there, as well as the National Institutes of Health. Once the advocacy program is going, our website, the front of the website will look similar to what you see here today with the Capitol building on it. And then the language that we want you to get into the offices in order to be able to support the Dear Colleague letter is printed on there. So it'll be quite simple. We'll send an email blast out when the timing is right, when the Dear Colleague letter is sent. And then you'll go up there to where it says Be an NF Advocate. It'll drop down and it'll say Advocacy Action. You click on that, and then you'll see a letter like this that has the language this is the language that's going right to the Congressman's office. Feel free to edit it and make it personal. And then on the bottom there where it says number 2, sender information, you'll put in your name and address, and then that email will get sent to your congressional office. One of the things that while you're all on the webinar tonight, I'd like to ask, as we're getting ready to go to the Hill, if you would be willing to send your personal story. I have this language up here that you could use as a sample to include in a personal story, and this will be uploaded to the nfnetwork.org website so that you can have access to this language again. It'll be under webinars. And if you could send them to us here, we would be glad to take your story with us to the Hill. So tonight I'd like to thank you all for your participation. I just wanted to go over a couple of points I know that Katie has already made with you. So make sure to let us know when you schedule a meeting, when you plan for that meeting to take place. Feel free to request a mentor to kind of guide you or accompany you through this process, and give us the opportunity to give you the print material so that you can leave that behind. And I wanted to leave my contact information on there. Well, thank you very much, Katie. Let's look to see if we've got any questions. Yvonne, can you open the questions for us here? Make it a little bit bigger, and then I can read you the question. Okay, I see Wendy's asking the question, how do I obtain a copy of these slides? Wendy, if you would like, you could go ahead and send me an email, and I can just send you the slides. And if you'd like to wait, they will be on the NF Network website, but it might not be till tomorrow night before they're loaded on the website. Okay, Sherry. Oh, she's asking about the slides too. And then Lynn has a question. I'm going to give this one to you, Katie. I will reach out to my representative. Oh, no, she's just telling us she's going to reach out to her representative, and she's going to be in touch with us. Sarah says, yep, wants the slides. We'll get them out to you, Sarah. How many House letter signers do we typically like to have? Can you do that one, Katie?
Sure. Well, last year we had, you guys have a House, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so last year in the House we had, I think, 121 members sign the letter. That was actually the most that we've had. So we'd like to have, obviously, more. There are 435 members in the House. I think we would like to get at least 121 and continue to grow that number.
Absolutely. And here's another one. This one's from Sharon. She'd like to know, what effect will the change in administration have on our efforts this year?
Unfortunately, I think the answer is we don't know yet. President Trump has expressed the desire to increase defense spending. If that ends up happening, that in theory could be helpful to us in terms of more money going to the defense bill in general. There has not been he has not made any sort of comments about research at the Department of Defense, so I don't know at this point if he will or if he has an opinion on it. There has been, in Congress, there has been a change in the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee in the House has a new chairwoman, Kay Granger from Texas. So we'll have to see how she decides to handle these programs. There's typically been a lot of support in Congress for them. The Senate leadership of the Defense Subcommittee has remained the same. Senator Cochran from Mississippi and Senator Durbin from Illinois, and both have been very supportive of medical research at DoD. So we're going to just have to keep working hard and see how everything plays out.
Yeah, I agree, Katie. It's a good year for educating Congress. The new members that we have that have been elected to Congress, just so that we keep our message strong.
I think it's very important. It's very important that members hear from constituents that the importance of this research. I just want to make sure to make that point. I mean, it's important every year, but I think just with the uncertainty in the new administration, I think it's going to be vitally important this year for members to hear about the support.
Absolutely. And then there's one last question here, and then this is from Lynn. Is there any way for us to find out how many people in our states have NF? So we can mention that. Absolutely, Lynn. We have some graphs here where we can send that to you. We just need to, if you could give me an email, I will make sure that you get all of that information, all the information that we've talked about tonight. Okay, and then Lynn says, thank you very much and see you in Washington. And then we also have another, thank you from another Lynn. And now I'd like to say thank you to Katie for her time this evening to explain to us how we can do these congressional meetings. I want to encourage all of you who are on to reach out to me tomorrow back in the office here. I'll be glad to get you the information. I can do an email out to all of you who attended the webinar tonight tomorrow and make sure that you all get the fact sheets, the information about the number of people with NF in your state, the military benefit sheets. We have a question and answer sheet, so I'll send out a pretty comprehensive email out to all of you so that you have that information. And in the meantime, don't hesitate to give us a call here at the office if something in there is confusing, or if you'd like us to give you a mentor to kind of help you through this process. Well, thank you to everybody for participating. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your help. Bye-bye.